We're living in a world where comments about aging run rampant. We're surrounded by messages about looking younger every day. What if aging had less to do with how you look and everything to do with who you are becoming? It's what we are all craving in a sense, to be seen for who we are, valued for what we have to say and contribute, and loved aside from our outer appearances or accolades. I'm excited to dive into this episode on the wisdom in your aging and how to think of what you've gained in your life versus what you may have lost, starting with the moments that crack this open for me. I'll see you in the episode. Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. This is your host, Maureen Spielman, and I think a lot about the aging process, as I think probably most of us do who are living life. And there's a lot of outer messages and inviting for us to dig beneath the surface for what is truly ours, what our story is going to be, what is going to dictate the choices that we make. And I'll start first by saying, I was really struck recently, and I think I wrote this down, but I was sitting in my dermatologist's office just for my annual well skin check. And I saw a brochure on the wall that said, "Live your accomplishments, not your lines." And I just sat with that for a second because on the surface, it sounds so inspiring, this marketing message of live your accomplishment, not your lines. But underneath it, there was a message that I read that my lines and my aging were something I needed to apologize for. And so that's just one version of the messages that come at us all the time. And I think that as I walk this path of becoming more aware of myself, becoming more aware of how I'm influenced by outer messaging or expectations or even images that might be coming into my field that I'm being bombarded with that make me question or invite me into the question of how do I want to live my life? How do I want to live this life? I'll say too that some of these messages might come across in the form of, you look great for your age, which might, for a moment be really fulfilling, but might also be a little bit shaky under the surface as to what that really means for you. Because, I remember even a time where I went when I was a young woman, a very young woman. I believe I was in college and I thought I needed to lose a bunch of weight. So I did so. And when people would say, like, you look so great, it would bring up in me like, well, wait a minute. Are you seeing me? Is this all about my outer appearance? So I think for me, it started really young. And I could venture for many of us that is the case. So comments like, you look great for your age, or you barely have any wrinkles, or did you get enough sleep? Isn't that outfit a little too young for you? They're all comments on how we look. And I think ever since I was a young girl, I really wanted to be seen much more deeply than that. They're so seldom the questions about who we're becoming. I'm personally interested in this conversation and what it stirs in you, what comes up for you throughout what I suggest. I'm not interested in making any current choices or interventions that someone might be choosing for their life, right or wrong. Actually, I'm trying to get away from any of that. This is more me reconciling the world I have grown up in and lived within and determining what is more important to me now more than ever. I know I'm not alone in this journey, and it's having the conversations. It's being willing to go there and say what really matters the most before we get to someplace like our deathbed, when they say, like, 5 things the dying say that they wish they would have focused on. And it's bringing this conversation into a younger part of our lives. Even if we're 50s, 60s, 70s, it's still pertinent and relative of changing the conversation. I want to ask the question today: what happens if we stop measuring our age by our outer appearances and start measuring it by our wisdom and what we know to be true? I hope by the end of this episode, you'll have a way to catch yourself the next time you make or receive one of these appearance comments. You'll have a new lens for what your lines and the changes you're experiencing actually represent, and hopefully walk away with one question you can sit with this week to bring you more in touch with yourself. If you're listening and you're younger, this may not fully land yet, and that's okay. These messages don't disappear with a generation, whether you're Gen X like myself, a millennial, or Gen Z. We're all swimming in somewhat the same water, just at different times in our lives. So, this is less about age and more about noticing what you've absorbed so it becomes conscious instead of automatic for you. So let's talk a little bit about the outer focus story we inherited. I'll go back to my generation, Gen X. That's 1965 to 1980. We grew up with a healthy dose of what we look like. And this came through media big time. And I remember when I was taking a media class in high school, it was this great media class that spanned a lot of pop culture that was coming out in the time. But because I grew up in an era of heavily fashion magazines and getting things in print form, advocating, how you could dress or the makeup you could wear or the haircut that looked best on you, I tend to go to that print culture. But I always remember that there was a model named Twiggy in the late 60s. I think she was popular around 1965 to 1970. And before that, there was a different form of women's bodies that was more culturally accepted. I think that there was always probably like a really thin as in kind of aspect to the pre-culture to that. But that really ushered in this whole idea of bodies looking a certain way and maybe even one way. And I didn't know it when I was such a young girl, because being born in 1969, I mean, if I'm focusing on like the 1980s and all the magazines and magazine subscriptions I had in my house with my four sisters, my mom, is that we were just surrounded by messages. And there was that fun to it too, right? We can all look back on that era of magazines and be like, oh my God, it was so amazing. And to have no other distractions calling us, really. Maybe you were involved in activities that, when you were young, maybe you had your outside job. I'm talking about the younger years, but that's the way we took in information. And this is the body types we saw, the measurements of beauty we saw. And the crazy thing then was, if you're my age and older, you remember that they would always talk about the measurements of the women. And they would say it was the bust ratio to the waist to the hips. Remember that? So it would be like, God, I don't even remember, like 32, 24, 30 or whatever it was. But these are the messages that you ingest. And I think that this episode is not only about my generation at all. I mean, it is about the wisdom in our aging, but I really think a lot of what my generation and maybe even baby boomers before us were realizing a lot of things now as we come into this really beautiful time of personal growth and self-love and awareness and personal transformation. And some people might say like, oh, it's all overboard. You know what? I think it's all how you view it. I can say that I've personally benefited and changed a lot of patterns by focusing on my inner world. But going back, like there were these messages and we ingested them time and time and time again. And it really affected how I felt about myself, I believe. And absent having messages in my home that were cultivating other parts of myself is important, like my intelligence or my abilities or how I could shape the world. That was sort of it. That's what I was getting about the importance or the hyper importance of these aspects of life. And were there ever questions that I deeply craved of, self-reflection of how does this make me feel? Questions like that with my girlfriends, my sisters. Are the images I'm seeing realistic or applicable to my life? And are they really the most important thing? And if I could go back to my younger self and have those conversations, I think it would really be beautiful. And as I always talk about, like, we are mentors for the generations to come. So planting seeds about how is that making you feel when our younger generations are seeing so much on social media and ingesting information in a new and different way and applying what we've learned about what is truly important is just a beautiful guide for what can be. So what I'm kind of getting at, you glean, is the focus and obsession about our outer appearance. That's something that's existed and still exists. It's existed for a long time. And so much of my life, it's left me with an empty feeling inside. Some part of me, it brings up tears just saying it. Some part of me that maybe only felt valued for the outer appearance, which all I ever wanted to be seen for was what was my light, what was my brilliance, my intelligence. And I believe that's all we are seeking at the end of the day, to be seen for who we are at our core, in our essence, in our authenticity. And I share that all not to relive it, but because I think naming it and how we absorb this is a way to eventually put it down as we're really determining what's most important for our lives. And that's where aging strangely becomes this ally, this wisdom instead of an enemy. For each of us in life, there's these turning points. And I guess what I'm learning is that the turning points are happening all the time, and they're alchemizing inside of us the way they do, that bring us to new insights and revelations about ourselves. So it can seem linear, like you had an event in your life that brought you great wisdom. But that's likely because along the path of going through that challenging thing, you asked a lot of internal questions. You pulled in support for yourself. You read a book. You inquired more deeply and looked at what was yours and what was not yours anymore. And usually that is the conditioning we received from the outside world, the conditioning we received in our homes, that's asking us constantly to let go of, let go of, let go of, to allow the true you to emerge. I've had many things in my life that have been the awakeners, and I'll recruit in the youngers because I see younger people going through things intensely, which I did too, but I can see it. I guess now that I'm a parent, or I'm, turning into an elder, you just see the patterns and what is the universal human condition. But I think what we're trying to do these days is bring in awareness and consciousness earlier so we can navigate life with, I believe, more ease, more grace, more fulfillment, more understanding. So I'll just say that. But I believe my big teachers that got me to current wisdom is definitely raising my kids and asking, who the heck am I in that sort of equation of raising a family? Definitely going through breast cancer as a major illness and awakener has informed my life and brought me to deeper questions, got me in touch with my intuition, allowed me to determine what my path was going to be with that, what interventions I would choose, what was best for me, what, taking in other people's opinions, but kind of putting my own opinion as higher or more worthy than anyone else's, even though a lot of great information came to me, turning to new perspectives and modalities for healing, opening up my worldview in general. That was definitely one of my biggest teachers in life. I think that losing both parents over the span of 7 years brought me to more realizations and what that means to be untethered in a physical sense to the parents who brought you into this world, as answering the questions of, who am I and what am I doing here? And what's my mission? What's my purpose? And those kind of questions and elements of life becoming really, really important. And really the grounding nature of, again, going back to guiding children having challenges in their own life and stepping into more of who I'm meant to be, how I'm meant to guide, and also just holding really sacred space around those things. They all bring us to so much more than what this aging process is about. And so while the headlines read menopause and they read how to be with your wrinkles and how to drop the weight, as I get into this episode and share from my heart, I realize that this is it. These are the headlines. These are the talking points. And there's more conversations around it for sure. And definitely more garnering, like this I don't want to say alchemizing again, but more information coming. I want to ask you a few questions as you listen to me and me talk about my awakeners, the things that have gotten me in touch with my own wisdom. What was the actual moment, or just moments or accumulation of moments, that cracked this knowingness open for you? Was it going through a divorce or a breakup? Was it like me going through an illness? Was it a loss of a job? Was it hitting a milestone birthday? Was it having influential conversations in your life? And it's not just like life just happens and then I changed. No, you were exposed to something that created an internal part of you to be stirred and woken up, that led you to your next revelation and realization. And what did you notice change in what you used to care about before that time, and that what you began to care about more? And if you can sometimes take a look at that and realize, before this event, this is how I approach life. After this happened, I developed these new abilities, paths, awarenesses, questions about myself and my process. So if I said before I had breast cancer, I used to think that was in 2018, 19, that life was more happening to me for sure, that I was a victim to life. I can say that sort of in general, that life was more dualistic. There were a lot of rights and wrongs. There were a lot of blacks and whites as to, what was acceptable and unacceptable. And going through spans of time that made me consider my own mortality, that had me look at really big decisions. My after became, what was my limited worldview before this, and how did I open up? How did I open up any thoughts I had about how one healed? What were the important elements in my soup, in my stew for healing? And I think these things are still developing, but it's neat to look at maybe your event, the thing that happened in your life, your kids leaving for college, taking care of an aging parent, which was really cumbersome. And then when they passed away, or even the process of taking care of them. What did I think before? What did I learn? And what do I know now? And see, these are the things that the outer appearances and the things that are the headlines, they kind of like take a side place in the room, right? Because when we can be in the element of what the heck you've learned through all of it, and the great wisdom and the great tapping in you are doing, it's stunning, really. I wrote this quote, and then I'm going to share with you some other quotes. As our skin softens with age and shows the smile lines and crevices of our experiences, can we gaze upon this version of us as gorgeous just for existing? Not gorgeous despite the lines, gorgeous because of what they mark. Every one of them is proof you were here, feeling something fully. And now when I look in the mirror, I try to remember these things. And when I think I need something else to change what I see, I think of these things. Okay, I'm going to share with you a few quotes around aging that I pulled and why I thought they were sort of cool. See how they land with you. This first one is from a great beauty of former times, Sophia Loren. She said, "There is a fountain of youth. It is your mind, your talents, the creativity you bring to your life and the lives of people you love. When you learn to tap this source, you will truly have defeated age." And I mean, who can't agree with that? What if the fountain of youth had nothing to do with the way we looked? That's just a question. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm putting it out there. This one was by the great Oprah Winfrey. Every year should teach you something valuable. Whether you get the lesson is up to you. Every year brings you closer to expressing your whole and healed self. And I believe that Oprah has always done the interviews and I think, done the work. She speaks like a very wise woman. And that speaks to life as our teacher, and not just moving through something blindly, but moving through things consciously and asking, why was that here for me? What brilliance did I bring to it? What did I learn? And who did I step out of on the other side of it? The third quote is by Louise Hay, who was a great metaphysical teacher. If you don't know her, she's the founder of Hay House. And she said, "Know that you are the perfect age. Each year is special and precious, for you shall only live it once. Be comfortable with growing older." And lastly, if you associate enough with older people who do enjoy their lives, who are not stored away in any golden ghettos, you will gain a sense of continuity and the possibility for a full life. And that was said by Margaret Mead. And I believe that to me, it's not even about our age here. It's living with people who are willing to have conscious conversations, creative conversations, conversations that lend towards your expansion and growth. That's who I want to be around. And that's the beautiful part of it all. Aging, whether you're going 20 to 25, 25 to 35, 50 to 60, whatever it is, it changes us because it brings with it so many experiences. And it's funny because some people will say, with aging comes wisdom. And I think it just depends on the individual, because you can have someone at the very end of their life where they didn't garner a lot of wisdom. They probably do on a soul level at some level, but they'll come back and repeat this lifetime. Obviously, my viewpoint. But yeah, it varies. And I guess all we really need to worry about at the end of the day is ourselves and who we surround ourselves with. So I looked at both my own process and enjoying the process with others to embrace becoming wiser as I move through my days, my months, my years. Some of my keys to tapping in and being in that wisdom as I age are the one that I just mentioned, engaging in deep conversations. And the funny thing about deep conversations are, I think about this often. A deep conversation for me, can be short and quick. It can be, I want to almost like change deep conversations to enlightened conversations. I can have that. I can experience it with a text with somebody, sharing love, sharing light, sharing goodness, being there for somebody, expressing myself, feeling fully expressed. And so for you, how do you feel about that? When was the last time you engaged in an enlightening conversation, even if it was a brief one? And what did it feel like to you? And did it make you want more of that in your life? Because I can have these short texts and be like, I want more of that in my life. I want more of that in my life. Because there's an energy that comes through in the connection and the communication that's happening. And yeah, I just sign me up for more of that. I think that the wisdom that comes for aging for me too, and it's what I've always, I think, promoted in any group that I've run, is that whatever you're up to is going to be your own vision and version of what wellness is to you, what fully living is to you, how much you want to show up. What are your rules? What are the ways you're defining it? And I do think that there's a clarity, like in this conversation, if I think about it too. And it's an invitation to just, settle into yourself. And maybe we do a workshop around this, right? Where we're truly kind of putting down, like, these are my values. This is what I've learned. This is what I've gone through. And yeah, it's sparking some ideas for me, and maybe a workshop or a group we put together around the aging process. So if that speaks to you, and I'll have this, if you're not on my newsletter, go to my website under the freebies. And there's a Mystical Sisterhood resource guide, and then a book, my favorite books, freebie I have. Sign up for my email list, and then you'll definitely be on the list for any workshops or any offerings that I'm making. That's the easiest way to get it, or follow on Instagram at Maureen Spielman right now. But I think, like, we get to determine, like, okay, what's our own recipe for this wisdom in my aging that Maureen's talking about. And when I contemplated that, for me, it's how much laughter am I having? How much inspiration am I getting from the people I'm surrounding myself with, the shows I'm taking in, the books I'm reading? How much do I want to move my body? Do I have to do it that specific way? Or am I okay if I create my own? I'm the kind of person too, I don't know if you relate, that rigidity I don't do well with, but that doesn't mean that structure can't be put in place to live, our best lives. I probably have some childhood and past loves, life stuff around that. Really celebrating. I think one thing we can do is celebrate the patterns you're letting go of. In what ways did you used to play a certain role, act, with a mask of not who you really were, whether it was the people pleaser or the overgiver or the one who didn't speak up, and say, oh my gosh, I'm either I'm aware. You could be aware of it, not transcended anything yet. You could be in the transcending process, or you can say you're fully on the other side. Wherever you are, celebrate it. It's a beautiful thing. And I think wisdom in our aging, which is one we can really impart on younger generation, is knowing that each day is a gift. We're often reminded this when something happens, like there's a death or there's an illness that comes out. But the more I tune into that each day is a gift, and I may still be in the process of unwrapping what that gift actually is, the more it brings me into gratitude. Life as a gift. I love that. That's not probably going to be the episode title for this, but life as a gift is really beautiful. It allows me to look at the challenges I've had, the hurdles, the missteps, the celebrations, the things that I certainly didn't expect, and look at them as, how did I, benefit from it? What did I gain in the process? And, I said that in the very beginning of the episode, I think in my intro, of what have I gained? What have I lost? And I originally thought of that title after I had gone through breast cancer. And, it was such on a physical sense, you lose a lot when you go through big illnesses, but what you gain is so often so much more. So I'm wondering, if you've been through big things too, do you see it that way now? And if you're still in it, maybe not yet, but in the aftermath, in the hindsight is 2020, in the looking back, that's where the gifts are typically revealed. So one simple practice I want to move into this week is a question to ask yourself the next time you might want to focus on something in your outer world. Just bring yourself into your inner world. Take one moment to value yourself, or maybe even loved ones in your life, for focusing on how you've grown, how you're growing, how you've transformed, what qualities you bring to life that makes you you, and focus on what you want to grow and cultivate more of in your life. And that all comes from within. And it's not to say that none of it matters on the outside, but it's an invitation to the inside, is what I'm saying today, what I'm inviting today, what I'm offering today, to delight in you as the sovereign being at the center of your life, you determining what matters most to you as you age, no matter your age, and you decide how much weight your own wisdom carries for yourself and maybe as a guide for someone else. If this episode gave you anything to sit with, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who needs to hear it too. Until then, I say age on your own terms. There is so much wisdom in your aging. This is an episode I've wanted to talk about for quite some time, and I'm just thrilled to be putting thoughts onto paper into action, paper into voice, expression. Let me know what you think, and let me know if there's any way that I can assist you through your process. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for being here, Mystical Sisterhood. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or MysticalSisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.